In this episode of Video Show Me How, I'm going to show you how to install new injectors on your Jeep Wrangler CRD. First up, the engine bay. These are the actual injectors here. These are the fuel rails. Here's your airbox. This is the crankcase breather. And over here is, of course, your battery. And before we do anything, we want to make sure we disconnect it. Step 1, we need to remove the airbox, and you can see here I have a custom wild boar snorkel, so it may look a little bit different to yours, but essentially we just want to undo any hose clamps that are holding any hoses together, unplug the two sensors that are attached to the airbox itself, and pull the airbox up. There are 3 locating pins and it should just pop up and out. Step 2, next up we need to remove the breather hose. Pretty straightforward to remove. Here you can see the catch can that I have. This is essentially catching any of the oil fumes and vapor before it gets put back through the engine. So if you don't have one, I suggest you press stop and head down to your local store and purchase one. Step 3, using pliers, remove the hose from your radiator overflow. Step 4, we need to undo your MAP sensor here, so be careful not to drop any nuts down into the engine. It's easy to do, so be very careful when you remove the 2 bolts that are holding it down. We need to remove the wiring clip, and there's also a vacuum hose that we need to remove. Once done, just put it to the side. Now you should have clear access to the fuel rails and then the injectors themselves. Step 5, next we want to remove the injector wiring loom, and sometimes this is easier with a pair of pliers. There's a little push clip, you need to depress it and pull. Step 6, now we want to remove the fuel return lines. These have a little clip that you need to be careful and pry upwards. So if you're lucky you can do this by hand, otherwise grab a flathead screwdriver. You can see here the little edge. You essentially need to pull them up, and once the locking pin has pulled up, you should be able to remove them by hand. Here's a closer look at the lip and exactly how these babies work. Step 7, grab a 17mm spanner and loosen each of the fuel lines, but don't loosen them right off at this stage. Step 8, grab an 18mm spanner. Why they're not the same, I have no idea, but anyway, grab an 18 and loosen the nuts of the fuel lines on the fuel rail side. Step 9, completely undo each of the nuts on both sides. You should be able to do this by hand. We need to remove the rails and remember their order. You can put them down either in order, you can label them with some tape and some lettering on it. Whatever floats your boat, but make sure you remember what order they go in. Be sure to cover the holes with some clean rags. It's super important that everything stays clean. Step 10, next up is removing the injectors themselves. So we need to move the wiring harness up and out of the way and completely expose the injectors. Step 11, we need to remove the locating bolts holding the injectors in place. So using a socket, loosen and remove the bolts. When you do, be careful not to drop the locating washer into anywhere in the engine, because you'll find you'll be there forever trying to get the thing back out. The 4th injector is in a tight spot, so try using an extension bar and run it behind the wiring loom. You can see the locating washers here. These locate the injector to hold everything in place. Step 12. Now we need to remove the injectors themselves. Now fingers crossed with this part, we need to remove the locating bracket first. That's the little cast piece that you can see here. So once that's out, the injector should then just pull out. It's here you really want to have said your prayers to the CRD gods to make sure that the injectors themselves do just pull out. They should pull out just by hand with a bit of a wiggle, but we really want to hope that the motor hasn't seen too much salt from driving on the beach, or too much mud or rust or anything like that. If they won't budge, start hitting them with your favourite lubricant of choice. Here you can see the injector, and this one in particular has failed. Each of the injectors will be coded, and you can see the load of numbers here. It's worth taking a quick pic of any of the injectors you think might still be good, and noting which cylinder it came from. They're worth having as a backup. In my case, only 2 of the 4 failed. I chose to replace all 4, but at least now I have 2 that I know were okay, and if I keep those numbers, I may be able to use them as a backup in the future. You'll also want to remove the rubber washer, because you need to reuse those. Once out, be careful not to drop anything down the injector holes. You want to have another clean rag ready to cover them. Here you can see the old injectors, and they're not looking great. Here is our lovely new ones. Step 13. Mark which injectors are going into which hole. It's good to just use one of these white pens for this. The front of the engine is cylinder number 1, and the back of the engine is cylinder number 4. Step 14. Use some anti-seize. In this case I'm using copper, but there's different types, and apply it to the bottom half of the injector. This will make sure that in the future they come out with just a little wiggle and you don't have any dramas with them being rusted into the head. Don't put any though on the injector nozzle itself. Step 15, coat the other 3 injectors. Righto, step 16, it's time to reinstall. So grab your marked injector number 1, make a note of the codes, or better still, take a photo with your phone and install it into its new home. Make sure you remember to add the black washer, and make sure the channel of the washer is face downwards so it seals against the injector hole. Step 17, grab the injector bracket and locate it into the slots of the injector. Step 18, screw down the injector bolt. Step 19, complete the same process for the other 3 injectors. Step 20, once all your injectors are in, we want to grab your torque wrench, double check your injector torque amount just by Googling it, it'll come up really easily. Just you making your model of the car, injector torque setting, it'll be the first thing that comes up, and torque the injector bolts. For this 08 Jeep Wrangler CRD, it was 33 Newton meters. Step 21, up next is reinstalling the injector wiring harness. Pretty straightforward, connect it to the new injectors, make sure they go into the right ones, clip the clip down to lock them in place. Step 22, we're getting close. Now it's time to reinstall the fuel rails. Make sure they go in the right order as we set them out earlier. Step 23. Next, reinstall the fuel return hoses. These simply push down on the injector return nozzle. Then you just need to clip down the locking pin. Step 24. Tighten each of the fuel rails. We need the 17 and the 18mm spanners for this. Do this progressively on both sides. We want to be careful not to over tighten either, especially on the injector side, so that the injector twists. So you want to torque the fuel rail side a little bit, then the injector a little bit, and so on until they are both tight. It's about 20-25 Newton meters, but double check that in your manual. Step 25, reinstall the MAP sensor on top. Make sure you reconnect the vacuum hose and obviously the wiring connector as well, and push the little clip down to make sure it stays in place. Step 26, reconnect the radiator overflow hose using your pliers. Step 27, reconnect the crankcase vent hose using your pliers once again. Step 28, reinstall your airbox and connect the hoses that you removed earlier. Remember the two sensors that connect into the airbox itself. Step 29, we are pretty much there, people. Check all of your work, double check all your hoses and connections that you touched to make sure that everything's in place, that everything's connected, and you haven't missed anything. Step 30, this is pretty much it, folks. We want to reconnect your battery. Head on over to the ignition, turn the key, leave it in the pre-ignition stage for around 30 seconds. What this will do is turn on your fuel pump and will prime the fuel rail with plenty of lovely diesel. Start the engine. The engine should start right up. It might take a couple of seconds of turning over before it fires into life. After that, get on top of the engine there and have a good check for any leaks. There shouldn't be any. From here, the engine should run okay and should be able to drive around. Generally speaking, you'll need to get your new injectors coded to the engine's ECU for optimum performance. This can be done at some workshops and almost all dealers. We hope you found this guide useful, and if you did, hit the old like button to let us know. All the notes are in the description, so if you'd like a paper copy of what we've gone through, simply cut and paste. Feel free to leave any questions in the comment section, share with anyone you think might find this useful, and of course, subscribe for more videos just like this one.